WCON 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air each and every Tuesday at 2:30. We're coming to you live today from the Ag Extension Center or Corporate Extension office in Clinton, North Carolina. We want to give a shout out to all those folks in Bladen County and offer all the blessings and prayers for everybody that has gone through this horrific hurricane. We're talking with a couple of folks today about agriculture and the impact with agriculture. And I'll start with Eileen Coite, who is the Director of Corporate Extension right here in Sampson County, followed by Bruce McLean. Bruce, you've been down with the Corporate Extension Office for some time in Bladen County, and your specific title, I think, is Field Crops and Commercial Horticulture Specialist down there.
Correct.
Bladen and Sampson got hit pretty hard, guys, and we've talked about this with the county manager last week and his team here in the county. Over $1 billion in agriculture alone, 987 million of that, particularly around Bruce crops and crop-related stuff. I know it's a lot of things you look at in your area. My first kind of observation would be, give us your big picture, what you saw, and some of the tragedies, not only to farmers and humans, Eileen, but I know you're very concerned about animals and livestock and that kind of thing. We lost quite a few of those, over 5,000 hogs and over 4 million in chickens. So where are we at? What have you seen? What have we had to recover from to this point?
Well, JW, a lot of what we saw with this storm was similar to Matthew in that it took out some of our infrastructure and our roads, being able to get to farms. When we lost power, trying to keep those generators operating, particularly on our swine farms. You know, a lot of those buildings are tunnel ventilated, and so they've got to have that power to keep the airflow going on through there, to keep the feed to them, to operate those feed lines. And then, of course, when you lose those roads, being able, you know, they stocked the farms pretty heavily with feed before the storm in preparation. And if there were critical areas, I know there were some farms that were maybe depopulated a little early, or maybe some animals were moved to better locations. But at the same time, once that hits, and then you have to detour around and try to get resources as they're needed, it really is a struggle. So particularly if there were some roads that were already closed, and even, you know, not storm related, and then you know, they were even worse, or more things were added. So I know we had at least one cattle producer I know lost some cattle. They couldn't find them for several days, and then when he did, several of them had died due to the storm.
Do they drown, or is it through starvation, or what?
Well, I mean, it could be drowning. I don't think it would have been the starvation, but I think some of them were just washed away in floodwaters.
Wow, the
Yeah.
water
And
was
calves,
that strong. Yeah.
You know, if a lot of our producers in this area do fall calving, and so you figure if baby calves were born right before the storm, during the storm, and they just drowned. It's just devastating.
Bruce, it's big numbers when you look at it, and you try to wrap your head around over $1 billion, and some folks are saying that might go to $1.5 billion. Still, a large percentage of that is in the crop, in the fields, everything from peanuts to potatoes to tobacco, all of those things. I know prior to this, you and I had talked, and of course we had been down and looked at doing a show from Bladen County,
Yes.
a regular monthly ag show, and our first show we were looking at was on peanuts. And fortunately or unfortunately, we never got to that, and we're now having to move everything forward. So for those folks that were thinking that we're going to be seeing a peanut show on Channel 16, it's going to be moved forward along with other things. But how did it hit the peanut crop and other related crops in your area?
Well, in peanuts in particular, you know, I'll compare it to Matthew. Matthew was a little later storm. It really affected us because it was right during peak time of digging, and you know there was a lot of peanuts that were already on top of the ground. That really just, a lot of them got washed in one corner of the field, you know, in a big pile, and it was really hard to harvest them. It's still a little preliminary, and so right now, you know, we're not 100% sure as far as how much it affected the peanut crop. We're expecting some loss from pod shed, maybe in some heavier ground where maybe the water stood a little longer. But so far, the earliest ones that's being dug, with this storm being much earlier, you know, a lot of the peanuts had not been dug yet. They were actually still in the ground, you know, with I guess that bit of safety, you know, them still being in the ground. And so a lot of the earliest ones they're digging very well right now. So, but you know, that is early. So you know, we are expecting, you know, some losses, you know, when the final tally is taken.
As far as in the ground crops, you know,
Yes.
and I think Bladen has its share. We do as well with sweet potatoes, and it's
Yes.
become a pretty growing export with the state now. How does sweet potatoes compare with the peanuts as far as their abilities to sustain floods, flood areas, and floodplain kind of situations?
Well, peanuts, you know, it's been pretty well documented that they'll tolerate, you know, 3, maybe 4 days of water, standing water on them. Sweet potatoes, on the other hand, they can really decline fairly quickly with standing water. So, you know, a situation where, you know, whether they were on the top of the ground, whether they were below ground still and had not been dug yet, how much water was standing on them. So there's a lot of factors that really sort of figure into the equation with sweet potatoes.
Is there, in Bladen County particularly, and I want to say Bladen County a couple of times on this show because I'm hoping the folks in Bladen will start picking us up as well. In Bladen County particularly, if you balance peanuts and potatoes, is it kind of evenly balanced? I know Bladen has a long history of peanuts with Houston Peanuts and a lot of other manufacturers down there. Is that still the leading crop as far as in-ground crop is concerned?
I would say so. As far as peanuts, I would say that we're somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 acres with peanuts this year. Sweet potatoes is, you know, much less. I haven't looked at the exact number, but I would imagine probably 1,000 acres or so. And so it's peanuts do lead as far as acreage wise. Suspecting that sweet potatoes may sustain more damage overall than the peanut crop though.
When we look at peanuts, when we look at some of these other crops, and I want to just name a couple. Number 2, I think export crop is flue-cured tobacco. Mm-hmm. Do you guys still do a lot of flue-cured tobacco? I know Eileen Sampson is heavily into that. So this is kind of the tobacco belt through here. Was it pretty much immediately devastated, the tobacco that was left in the field?
Yes, yes. And, primarily from what I've seen is what was left in the field was that last harvest, that last crop. And everything that I've seen has been a complete loss as far as what was left in the field.
So what I hear you guys saying is that timing on a hurricane almost is as critical as everything from wind speed to flooding and that kind of thing. But with agriculture, timing becomes critical because the destruction of it can depend on what point is that crop in place, what point. Even with poultry and livestock, are the chickens just ready to be taken out of the building, which most of the expense has been done, or have they just been brought in? Or maybe, as some counties, some farmers had some turkey or chicken litter, and they're having to deal with that now. Is that kind of what we're saying?
Definitely. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, because if you compare just Matthew and Florence, you know, there was about a month span. You know, Florence was earlier, so particularly with the field crops, that's a big difference there. So with our animal agriculture, particularly with our poultry and our hogs, animals are coming in and out throughout the year. But like you said, depending on when that group came in and what stage are they in, you know, are they very, very young and susceptible to, or not as, not as strong as an older animal, or was it time for them to go out and be harvested, and now, now that whole group is lost. So.
When you talk to folks in the business, and this is either one of you or both of you can field this question, when you talk to folks in the business of agricultural farmers, what is the level of a sense of, I'll say, kind of desperation with this particular hurricane? What are you hearing? I know you talked to a lot of folks when Matthew came through, but there seems to be a heightened sense with some people, did I get in the right business? What am I doing here? What are you hearing when you talk to folks in the field?
Well, I'll take this. Some of the growers that I've talked to, that because of slim profit margins, that even on a really good year, sometimes it is still difficult to really, for it to be profitable. And so whenever you have a situation like this, it can really make a lot of growers kind of reevaluate what they grow, but also at the same time, are they in the right business? I mean, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, and it kind of gets down to a point of discussing going forward. And Eileen, when we come back from break, if you will, I want you to pick up on that from the hog poultry side. Literally, what does that mean? Because I know in the industry itself, it's designed that you have a period of time that when these houses are built, that there's a payoff period. And some folks I have heard say, at that point in life, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go through that payoff. So we'll be back in a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in one moment. We're talking about agriculture in Bladen and Sampson County, and Duplin as well, but particularly stay with us.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Welcome back. We Should Know is on there. Channel 16 Star Communications in multiple counties. Two of the major counties for Star Communication, of course, is Sampson and Bladen counties. We have people today with us from both counties talking about agriculture, the impact of ag in both of these counties, as well as the surrounding counties that adjoins us, including Bladen, Pender, Cumberland County, Johnston County. We have a number of folks that listen to us in Wake County as well. We want to kind of explore this not only from the sense of what the loss was, but going forward as well. And Eileen, as we went off air a while ago talking with you as the Director of Corporate Extension here, and of course Bruce from Bladen County, his Extension office down there, the idea of folks losing their livelihood, and particularly with the livestock poultry industry, everything seems to be gradated based on getting that facility paid off, because some of these facilities we're talking $500,000 up, and that's probably, I'm probably lowballing those, Bruce, but probably $500,000 up in cost just to get them on the ground, and the farmer is in debt, and now all of a sudden everything's washed away. What is that? Give us a feeling of what you're hearing from that decision-making process as to what your farmers have expressed. What is that? I don't know how it would be to feel that. That's got to be a hard pill to swallow.
That's right. That's right. So just as animals are in different stages in those buildings, you have to think about some of these farms have been there for many, many years, and then some may have just been constructed. We'll take Sanderson Farms for example. There a lot of people are putting up chicken houses with Sanderson, and so if some of those have been damaged, hopefully a new structure is going to be built to withstand the wind and the rain and all. But if there's damages there, they've got a lot of money invested in that, and a huge loans taken out to to pay off those buildings. And so not to mention if somebody had damage to their home or they may have another farming enterprise. We have a lot of farming in southeastern North Carolina, as you know. We have people that they have crops, they have livestock, they have poultry. You have to kind of do that integrated type farming to be able to be successful, and so that when something bad happens in one area, hopefully something else will help offset, where you can still pay your bills. But then you may have another producer out there that maybe has one of the older facilities. Maybe it's an old turkey house, and maybe the whole roof is ripped off. And we had there's one grower that in particular it comes to mind, going back to those Memorial Day storms that we had with the straight line winds.
Yeah.
And I mean, their whole structure, they had 3 turkey houses that were all full of birds that were not far from being ready to go to market. And one of them was completely just totally fell down. The whole structure fell. And they saved, as many of those birds as they could and moved them over to another building, and euthanized others that, that you had. I mean, it's just devastating. But they ended up not refilling those houses once those birds were sent to market. And so there's some hard decisions like that have to be made, depending on, it's each individual producer situation and what they're going through, and what stage they are, with their family, and, is it a business that's going to be passed on to the next generation or not?
Yeah, Bruce, listen to Eileen, one of the things that strikes me is that historically, and of course I grew up on a farm, so I guess I can say this, farmers and agricultural people, I know of nobody has more resilience, nobody that has more determination, literally on the very fundamental level of making something happen each and every day. But with so many of these hurricanes happening back to back, it does kind of cause a person to pause and go, am I in the right business, I guess, occasionally. What sense are you getting from the folks in your area?
Very similar situation. I mean, it's a lot of them are evaluating. They're evaluating the land that they're farming. Whether if it has gone through 2 significant floods, is it really even worthwhile, to put that piece of land back in production? They're evaluating. I've even heard a few of them say, that they're that this is the second time that they've had, high levels of devastation, and so they're, really thinking about, even changing careers, getting out of farming altogether.
And that's kind of, guys, I think that's kind of a sad note in a way, because as much dependence as this state puts on agriculture, and with it being an $80+ billion industry in North Carolina, I'm not sure that we can afford that kind of loss for people to step away. Are you hearing encouragement things from folks in funding, whether it's from FEMA or some other agency? Is there adequate funding there? Of course, I know a lot of farmers had insurance on crops and other things, but they'll quickly tell you that it's never going to be enough to cover the loss. It may cover the crop value, but they've already invested a huge portion of that investment has either already been invested from a loan, as you just pointed out, Eileen. So what is their thinking from here, and what are you hearing? Is there adequate funding in place? Is the response adequate? We've seen the politicians. They've been down all over this part of the state. You don't have but a minute to turn a radio or TV on and there's somebody talking. But where's the results? And that's what I'm oftentimes getting people will say, well, find out where the money is. We ain't seen any yet. So tell us what's going on with that.
Well, I'll just say that I know I met last week with the Farm Service Agency. We always, after we have an event like this, we come together and bring our our strengths from our different agencies that are out in the field and see, what kind of disaster or what kind of impact the disaster had on our crops and our livestock. And so now what we need is for farmers to report their losses to the Farm Service Agency, and they have certain programs in place that through the Farm Bill that will help them recoup some of their losses. Of course, it's not going to be the same as it was, but help them maybe rebuild some of those roads, some of, field borders. There's the livestock indemnity program that'll help them with recouping on those livestock losses. Then there's, they have several different programs that are set up specifically to help folks get back on their feet. So,
Bruce, talk to us a little bit about, because Eileen just mentioned something that I wanted to touch on. Roads became a huge issue over the past few weeks. The ability to be able to get a feed truck into a facility, to be able to move whatever it may be, even if it was products that you were moving to the market. And of course, when the governor passed that declaration, a disaster declaration, it allowed vehicles to be able to travel at times that they normally wouldn't. And there was other things in there that was an advantage to that. But particularly as it relates to roads and their capability to withstand the transportation. Let's talk about those roads, not only in Sampson, but in Bladen County. How are they holding up? How did they hold up?
There were quite a few road failures. I mean, just where the road was completely inundated. And limited transportation, limited, being able to actually get some materials to some facilities. Just because either a portion of the road wasn't there, or even a large section may have been completely washed out, or even if it was the situation where the road was it wasn't stable enough to actually move feed across, equipment across, anything like that. So it was a huge impact.
Eileen, is there a need for us to rethink our relationship as agricultural people and Department of Transportation people to bring together a need for better roads and roads that can withstand more volume of water? Because clearly that was one of the key issues at a couple of points in this disaster, that farmers were going, look, I've got to figure out how to get a feed truck there. I mean, I can handle my houses is okay, my birds are okay, but if I don't get a feed truck there within a certain number of hours, they might as well be flooded.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they've got to be able to get those resources into the farms, and you've got to have a road to do it. No doubt about that. And I do think that after Hurricane Matthew, some of these roads and bridges that washed out, the structures that were rebuilt there were built stronger. And so we're grateful for that. But there were still others that, that were compromised this time. And so we've got to make sure that we continue to rebuild much stronger structures that can withstand this water, so that each time, we can get back on those roads quicker.
Bruce, if you had a message to the population when they're talking to their elected officials, would you encourage them to talk about transportation as it relates to quality of roads in the agricultural communities throughout North Carolina? Is that something that would be a key bullet that not only Cooperative Extension but you as an individual and understanding agriculture would say, talk to you folks about roads. We need better roads. Absolutely,
that's a definite consideration for any producer to really, because we've had two events to where it really showed some of the weak points and maybe some of the roadways and things like that. To be mindful, to really bring that to the forefront with some of the elected officials as well. Just if nothing else, just to point out the need. That we do need a strong infrastructure for transportation of agricultural products.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. Channel 16, Star Communications. We'll be back in one moment. We're talking about agriculture.
You come out to replace a bad sensor, and that adds a 5-year commitment to my contract, and you don't tell me? Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping homes secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody trying to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're talking about agricultural issues in post-Florence hurricane. And we have two folks, one from Sampson County. Many of you know, also you know the one from Bladen County, Sampson County, Eileen Coite, Director of Corporate Extension here in Sampson. And Bruce McLean, you're from Bladen County. You grew up in Bladen County, by the way, and have a lot of very interesting hobbies and talents that folks might not know. But you had one that was dealing with fish and growing fish in ponds to be sold for commercial purposes. A lot of people don't realize that, but that's part of this flood stuff too. And I looked at some of those areas that got hit heavy, and sometimes we don't think about it, but a commercial forest area estimated at $70 million, and $30 million for lawn and landscaping, $27 million in just vegetables and horticulture, $23 million, of course, is some of the funds that are going that were lost in livestock and poultry. But when I look at those numbers and I think about it, there's so many facets of agriculture. Typically, we kind of see a crop in the field, and we kind of cut it off there. Mm-hmm. But the dynamic doesn't change. I mean, we could talk. We've had a show that we talked a big portion of the show, Eileen, about horses.
Sure.
And the dynamic of horses and how they relate, not only as an industry, but as the commercial kind of thing to allow people pleasure riding and those kinds of things. So when we're talking about agriculture, I guess, how do we make the point that if you look at your life, that a big chunk of that piece of the pie for life sustainability is agriculture? How do we make that point? Either one of them.
You want to take that one?
Gracious. You know, I think you start early. You know, start with kids in school, mm-hmm. Because you know it's I've been to given some presentations before, and a lot of times I do ask the question. It's like, well, where does food come from? And a lot of their response is from the grocery store. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you know, there's a little bit of a disconnect even, you know, at younger age, and it does, you know, facilitate right on up to older age too there. You know, a lot of times people see crops in the field, but they don't quite correlate, you know, products being grown in the field and products on the shelf, you know, for consumption. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably even more if you look at the way we now grow a huge portion of our livestock, our poultry and those kinds of things, hogs, cattle. It's not the traditional environment of days gone by. It is huge manufacturing. It is a huge business that is interconnected. So mm-hmm. you almost have to explain that to people. And Bruce, I think you're right on point. We kind of make the assumption oftentimes that if you grew up and you live on a farm road in Bladen or Sampson, Duplin, or whatever county it may be, and you live on a farm road, you ought to know all this stuff. So that's kind of where we kind of go wrong. And Corporate Extension, I know, has historically got a piece of that action.
Sure. Well, like Bruce said, I mean, it's important to us for people to know where their food comes from. Mm-hmm. You know, back in April, we mm-hmm. teamed up and you helped us get the word out about our Ag Day that we had, where we could bring the community out and help them to learn in one day, you know, mm-hmm. a lot more about the agriculture that we grow in Sampson County. And it is so important. And folks need to understand that if we have a loss here, then, you know, we may have to ship in these products, some of these vegetable products and whatnot that maybe we could have gotten locally, but mm-hmm. they're damaged here, and so then we have to pay extra to get them imported from other places. And so it's just, there's so much that we do right here in these two counties. Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of money being applied to agriculture. I mean, when you look at North Carolina State University and you look at our land grant universities in North Carolina, a lot of expertise, a lot of scientific knowledge there, but for some reason you get back to what Bruce was talking about. It's so critical that we look at it. So if we were talking this morning, in case Mark Johnson, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, happens to be listening, which he may not, but in case he does, what would we say to that State Superintendent? Would we say, to your point, Mark, that look, there should be a course in the curriculum from starting in middle school or elementary school, and each year there should be at least one course that relates to agriculture that is kind of a required course to help people understand what agriculture is. Is that really pushing it too far, or is that something that realistically folks ought to be aware of? We're about creating new ideas here, so if you want to throw that on the table, I'll...
Well, the good thing is, in this part of the state, you know, we do have FFA in most of our schools, the high schools, and even some in the middle schools. So that's good.
Yeah.
It's there.
At least there's some visuality.
Yeah,
Future Farmers of America
right.
exist for a purpose.
At least that's there, and that's an option, you know, for those kids. But you know, but that's an interesting thought if you were to, you know, make it a requirement to know a little bit about agriculture, you know, take a course in agriculture when you live right in the heart of it.
And I think, Mark, what you were talking about a while ago is important too, because if you look at that, you could take any piece of that prospect of agriculture and develop it from, you were talking about sweet potatoes a while ago. Well, yeah, it is a product that's grown in the ground. It's part of agriculture. But what happens to that and the variations of sweet potatoes, you know, whether it's a sweet potato pie, or whether it's a baked sweet potato, or whatever the consumption is, and I'm sure there's hundreds and hundreds of other kind of parts of sweet potatoes that I have no knowledge of. But that one product has hundreds of facets.
Exactly. You know, North Carolina is the largest sweet potato producer in the U.S. And so whenever you have a huge impact like Hurricane Florence had on the state, and primarily, you know, the heart of sweet potato production, you know, it really affects the crop as a whole. And, you know, in every single facet of it. You know, all the other products that come from sweet potatoes. So,
how does the impact? And I'm just going to pull a crop out here, particularly that I'm aware of, that we import a lot to supply our livestock people. Bruce, as it relates to corn, this particular hurricane, the impact that it had on corn, how will that affect, Eileen, the chicken industry, the hog industry, the cattle industry? Because they look at that as a major food source, correct?
Sure.
What are we looking at with corn? Did we get a big hit on that, or was most of the crop in, or what?
Most of the crop was in, luckily. It was, you know, everybody was scrambling around whenever it looked really definite that the hurricane, you know, was on a direct course for us. You know, a lot of the growers were, you know, it was sort of all hands on deck. You know, let's get as much of it as we can out of the field. So the impact was relatively minimal on corn. You know, and really, if you look at the overall scope of corn production, you know, local corn production is just huge benefit to the livestock industry. But really, you start looking at the greater picture. You know, we still have, you know, a large amount of, you know, corn that does get brought in from like the Midwest and, you know, other really large corn production areas.
And that gets back again to our transportation capability, because once that food chain is shut down and you've got I don't know how many thousand turkeys or chickens in a building, and all of a sudden the food stops, it's a matter of hours, I guess, before we go into that stage where you start losing birds. So what do you think that the idea of working out some kind of process long term, and in the last segment I want to talk about engineering a little bit, but working out a long-term impact project with North Carolina State, again, some of our land, AT&T, land grant universities, to work out something on the engineering side to be able to make sure we have certain access capability and roads accessible and transportation accessible, so we know what happened, and in many cases it's the second time it's happened, In other cases, it just, you said that depending on where the needle is, it's going to be even worse or not as bad. But we know it's going to happen again. This is a story that's foretold over and over again. What do we do on that? Let's start that conversation. Where do we go from here? Is there someone that you're aware of now at NC State looking at this? Is there somebody now on a federal level that's looking at it?
Wow. Well, I mean, I don't know how much of it's being looked at. I would think that at NC State, maybe our Department of Bio and Ag Engineering would be wanting to be at the table in that discussion, because not only with our roads and being able to get to these farms with commodities and feed, but we have to also think about making sure that our farms and their lagoons are, structurally correct and built and everything, so that they can withstand the amount of water that we saw this time. And I think, we've got a good infrastructure in place for that, and we let people, do everything they could to irrigate and get those levels down before you have 20 inches of rain come at you. But still, we can always, every storm's different and brings us a new curve, in the way it attacks us. So we can continue to learn and build and improve. So
tremendous impact, I think, on both situations. And when we come back from this break, I want to kind of just do some brainstorming with you guys a little bit with this whole engineering question and kind of go from there. We're going to take a break and we'll be back in a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up on our break, and I want to kind of hold up my next question for our guest today, but I want to remind you you're looking at Channel 16, Star Communications. We're also aired on WCLN Radio. That's 1170 AM, worldwide at mixler.com/oldies 1170. There's a summation of this in the local newspaper that you can pick up, the Sampson Weekly.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air each and every Tuesday at 2:30. Coming to you today from the Corporate Extension Office here in Sampson County. Eileen Coite, the director of this whole arena of multiple things going on, Eileen, in your area. Bruce McLean, thank you for driving up from Bladen County. Part of our service area. We love folks in Bladen County, and just great to have you on again. I'll mention that we did have in mind trying to have a monthly ag show, which would be separate than We Should Know in gear, but everything's been moved forward because of the hurricane. Many folks knows already that Star Communications flooded, and all of their folks have been moved around, so this is a tragedy on many levels. We went to break a while ago talking about a number of issues. We're going to try to get back to that engineering piece with agriculture, but Eileen, I wanted to kind of touch base with you. You had some folks up a while back from Texas, right here in an adjacent facility here that was doing some pretty interesting things with something called AgriLife Extension. What is that all about, and tell us what was happening.
Okay. Well, the AgriLife Extension was the group here from Texas A&M, and unfortunately, they have, of course, had their share of hurricanes. But what comes with that is experience. You learn and improve. And so from what they dealt with Hurricanes Harvey and even Ike before that, they offered to come and share some of their knowledge and their tips with us here in North Carolina. So one of the things that they helped us with was setting up what we called animal supply points. And what we did is we had about 8 or 10 locations here in the southeast where we brought in hay. We had farmers from the western part of the state. We had one farm all the way from Georgia. There was another place from Pennsylvania that brought in hay for us. Everyone came together to help each other out, and we still have some hay here in Clinton. Clinton was one of the locations, and so we still have 100 bales of round bales of hay, and then we have 100 bales of square bales of hay, or the smaller bales. So if you're a livestock producer, a horse owner, you know, sheep, goats, and anything that eats hay and needs hay, and if your hay was flooded or damaged, moldy, anything in relation to Hurricane Florence, you could come get some hay. We can't provide enough to last you through the whole winter, but we have enough to help people get through this tough time and get back on their feet to where they can restock and maybe buy some hay from elsewhere.
Where does that hay come from? If we're looking at major devastation that we've seen, where can they find that hay? And is hay going to be so extremely expensive with transportation that folks are going to say, again, like we were talking about a while ago, I'm not sure I can sustain this? Right.
Well, we do have some areas, you know, in southeastern North Carolina that, you know, were more high and dry than others, and so they should be in good shape. But some of our smaller producers, they may have lost everything, and so that's why we set this up to help them get back on their feet. And then now we have connections with some of these farmers that brought in and donated this hay, so we can maybe after things calm down, we have those phone numbers, we have those connections with extension folks in the western part of the state that we can get more hay brought in to help them. So now you are going to have those shipping costs and you know, fuel costs there too. But we also, I mentioned earlier, the Farm Service Agency has some programs. So if we have producers that lost hay, they can go to the Farm Service Agency and report that loss and hopefully get some assistance on recouping and purchasing some hay to replace what they've lost. Or I'm talking a lot about hay here, but maybe there was a pasture that was underwater for a period of time, and now they're going to have to, you know, get that pasture back going and get the nutrients back in place so that they can grow more grass. And so some of those assistance programs will help them with that as well.
So Bruce, when I think about hay, again, I'm thinking back to crops, and of course I'm looking over here and thankful, but when I think about the crops, is that something that was major devastation in the Bladen County area? It seems that as we look further south and east, and the topography of the land is a bit lower, that there would seem to be a little more flooding down there, and on the southern end of this county there was more flooding. Kind of give us a picture of what you're seeing down there as it relates particularly to hay for larger animals.
Well, as far as like down around the Kelly community, Kelly and Rowan was devastated with you know, the amount of water that had come in. My understanding is that one of the larger hay, you know, if we're talking about hay in particular, that one of the larger hay producers in that area was, you know, complete loss with him. So, you know, and the thing of it is that there's a lot of folks in that area that have horses and goats and things like that. So, you know, that was one major source that they just completely lost. So we were able to actually, in Bladen County, we were part of the program. We actually had a hay drop in the Kelly community last week.
So you talking plane or what have you?
Well, it was brought in on tractor trailer.
Okay.
It was.
Did you have to do any kind of where you had to bring in air capability to get it in because you couldn't get it in with a trailer?
No, they were actually able to reach the site. But what we did as far as Bladen County, we were able to, yeah, some of the folks that did have some trouble, you know, maybe coming to get it, we actually did go deliver it for them. We had another agent in the county. We took her truck and went out to these farms, delivered hay. The first day, the second day, we actually had feed to come in, some horse feed, and we were able to actually take some hay and feed to to these growers, and also, that other growers that did have the capability of getting to the site, they came in and were able to get a truckload as well.
Talk about for a minute that idea of going forward. What do you see going forward? Are those folks, quote, out of the woods now, or is there going to be a need for continued donation of hay or other kinds of food sources for these animals? What are you seeing going forward, and what would you say to folks that maybe have got a contact somewhere, or maybe they have an abundance of hay? It might be one of those high and dry areas.
Right.
What would you say to folks about that? Are they still needed, and should they contact the respective offices of Corporate Extension, Bladen or Sampson or whatever to talk?
Well, the animal supply points that we had originally set up, like I said, I think there were 8, 9 of those, and they started. Well, the farthest west was here, and then we kind of expanded, and now we have one at Lake Waccamaw.
Okay.
But then the ones that were further south and east, a couple of those have shifted a little bit. Some have closed up completely, and then some have just moved to other locations or consolidated a little bit. We've been partnering with one of our research stations down in the Wallace area, because they have trucks and trailers that can help us move this hay from one site to another. So as there's locations like, for instance, down in Burgaw or Castle Hayne, that maybe the supply is, people are coming and picking up more of the hay down there, then we can shift it from Clinton there, or maybe from Clinton to Kelly or Lake Waccamaw or those kind of places. So we can do that in the short term. Now, as we wind these animal supply points down completely, the other thing we can do at that point is we can shift them to, we have a hay alert website. So that's through the Department of Agriculture. So there's an ag disaster hotline that they can call, or they can go to the website and they can find, there's a whole list on the hay alert page of hay producers, what they have, where they are, how much, all that. And they could coordinate with some of these folks in less affected counties to replenish their hay supply.
So I'm going to give out your numbers, 592-7161.
Correct.
That's 910 right here in Clinton.
Yes.
And 862-4591, Bruce, that's your number in Bladen County.
Correct.
They can call you if there's a question. A couple of things I wanted to mention very quickly, and then I want to kind of get into a closure here, but very quickly, when we're talking about the engineering piece of this, we're talking about everything from roads to rivers to locations of the buildings themselves, to the actual engineering of the building. So if there's folks listening, we're having that conversation here with you, and likely there's other folks that's having that conversation as well. I want to give you a quick wrap up to kind of mention things. I know we didn't get into, recovery with pesticides and what people need to do with that and that kind of thing. That's a whole other issue, but they can call that number. So I'll start with you, give you about 30 seconds for wrap up, Eileen. Anything that we might have missed? Okay.
Well, I would just say that we're excited that we've been able to provide some feed, some hay and some feed supplies to these folks who have had those losses. If there's other emergencies that are needed out there, NCDA has this Ag Emergency Hotline. I see you've got it right here. They can call that number.
That's the 866-645-9403.
That's right. And so that's a one location that they can
Anywhere
call
in the
in any emergency that they're dealing with agricultural wise, and we're here to help them.
About 20 seconds.
I'll just reemphasize everything that Eileen said, and also as far as any assistance that Extension can do, please call on us. We're happy to. That's what we're there for, is to help anybody out that we can.
And we look forward to getting out of Bladen County and doing that peanut show and get us, it'll be a 30-minute show, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be doing that on Channel 16, so we look forward to that. I want to thank both of you taking your time, being with us this morning and helping us kind of understand the agricultural piece. Ladies and gentlemen, we're, again, we should know, we're every Tuesday at 2:30, each and every Tuesday. Somebody asked me the other day, how long have you been on? A little over 8 years now, bringing you education information we hope will benefit you as you go forward with your life in the future. We're all working our way out of this, and as always, as we close, we always say to you, may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.